Welcome to this week's Who the Folk podcast. I'm Lonnie Goldsmith, the editor of TC Jewfolk. This week I talked to Jonah Kaplan, the investigative reporter for WCCO television. We talk about how Jonah got into the media, not wanting to be the go-to reporter on Jewish issues, and grad school on the Texas-Oklahoma border on this week's Who the Folk podcast. But before we get started, be sure to check out some of the other podcasts that Jewfolk produces, like The Jews Are Tired, where Lev Gringos is taking a deep dive into Jewish news, Kumba Hineni, Jewfolk's podcast on intersectionality with your host Enzi Tanner, Not Your Bubby's Nosh, Jewfolk's rebranded food podcast where Micah Siva has just finished season 1, and if you're looking for a weekly dose of Jewish pop culture, check out The Bagel Report, produced by Jewfolk in partnership with our friends at J, the Jewish News of Northern California. Go to tcjewfolk.com/podcast to learn more. Jonah Kaplan, welcome to the Who the Folk podcast. Thanks for coming on.
My pleasure. Thanks for the invitation.
This is great for a little behind the scenes look. We talked about this 3 months ago, doing this 2-3 months ago. About
it's worth the wait.
It is worth. Listen, I'm not complaining. I'm happy that we're finally doing this.
It takes a lot. Look, I'm still getting adjusted here.
Yeah.
It's my first Minnesota winter. When we got here, we moved at the height of the market. We actually moved into some We lived for 2 months. We lived in a friend's basement.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oliver that's some nice
and Haley
friends.
Lerner. They were wonderful, and we're still friends, by the way.
Oh, that's good.
Still great friends.
The 4 of you lived with them for that long, and you're still
4
talking.
4 of us with the 3 of them.
Oof.
Yeah. But it was they call it Camp Lerner. I mean, it was great. It was great, and we're very, very grateful to them. And look, those kind of friends are a great reason why we're happy here and why we wanted to come here, because we knew what kind of community this would be.
Well, that's fantastic. Well, for people who don't know, you are the investigative reporter at WCCO television. What is it? I have a good feel for what sort of the investigative journalism side of print is like. I come out of the print world. I don't really know what it's like in the TV world. What is investigative journalism like for television?
I think ultimately, every journalist is an investigative journalist, right? Every journalist should be digging, should be uncovering, should be revealing, should be holding people accountable. I think, the title of investigative journalist, it usually comes with kind of an implied heavier burden on those investigations, taking more time, digging even deeper, an element of seriousness to it. Again, not that other reporters are not serious and not that other investigations aren't, but usually at least in terms of what's promotable, what is kind of resonating, what can be effective in terms of marketing and also just building credibility. I think that's what it does. I look at myself, and I've been an investigative reporter with the title like that now for about 6-7 years.
Okay.
Officially. So here, and then I was 6 years investigative reporter in Raleigh, North Carolina. I've always found that investigative also means in-depth. Mm-hmm. And what does that mean in terms of spelling out things, in terms of adding context, perspective, and to me, raising what I call raising political literacy. Mm. Most people, and it's not their fault for not knowing, but most people don't know kind of just beyond the buzzwords and the headlines, and we live in such a fast-paced society, they don't know how processes work.
Right. Whether
that's how the economy works, the supply chain, healthcare, education, the mechanisms behind it, immigration. And so my job, I find, and my responsibility is to help empower people to better understand these issues, make decisions that are better for themselves, and not tell them how to think.
Right.
Not tell them this is how you should think, this is how this should be. It's here's the facts. It's up to you.
Right.
It's up to you. You decide now what to make.
We report, you decide.
Well, yeah.
Right. So the struggle I would think is that obviously most TV newscasts are half hour long, 22 minutes after commercials, and you have all kinds of you've got sports, you got news, you got weather, you got all the things you got to get in. How hard is it to go as in depth as you want to in what is probably not a huge amount of time.
Well, what's changed really is the technology, and now, I mean, you just talked about a 30-minute linear broadcast.
Right.
Which I would say is not even, we have those.
Which very much dates me, by the way, that I talk about that.
That's okay, and that's a classic way of...
Right.
But what's really great is, I mean, as technology and media has evolved, we can do a story that's 2 or 3 minutes on a linear broadcast and a normal on-air, 6 o'clock news. But then we have a streaming channel, CBS News Minnesota, and we have a website. So I've done on several occasions already here where we'll have a 2-minute version on TV and then a 6 or 7-minute version online and on the streaming channel because it gives room to breathe.
Right.
And so and they complement each other.
Right.
I mean, because people have those viewing habits of sitting down at 6 o'clock, maybe sitting down in the morning, and then we tease. We say, hey, here you can do more. You can see more. We can spell it out more. I think that's a tremendous opportunity for us.
And are people doing that? Like, you're finding that people are going either from the TV to their computer to watch more, or they're just watching it streaming all the time? I would imagine that's a growing piece of the audience, is that.
I think it's a combination.
Okay.
Because let's say, God forbid, there's another, George Floyd killing and then aftermath. Right. Let's say, God forbid, there's another 9/11 or a Boston Marathon or something. Mm-hmm. No one's going to say, quick, turn on Facebook.
Right.
No one's going to say, quick, check your Twitter. They're going to say, turn on the news. Mm-hmm. Now, whether or not they're turning it on a television or they're turning on a broadcast on their phone, they're still going to be watching a broadcast news.
Right.
And that, I think, is always going to stay, and we play every day for that big game. We practice every day. We do these everyday stories. We do these everyday newscasts to build the credibility, to build the brand, to earn the trust of the viewer, so that when stuff happens, when stuff hits the fan, as they say,
right,
and everyone's going to get splattered, they know, hey, quick, turn on Channel 4, turn on CBS Minnesota. Right. And that has happened. That has been happening with whether it's big weather events, elections, and, of course, I wasn't here for this, but a lot of the social unrest that happened over the past few years.
Right. Right. I mean, and that's obviously, as I'm sure you've learned already in your 6-7 months here in the Twin Cities, folks love their weather.
They do.
I mean, we're sitting in midwinter, and right, like when there's a big snowstorm, they want to know about it. It's weather people's time to shine.
Well, and it's not, but what I really appreciate and respect about, and I'm not going to talk about anyone else except our station, sure. But what I love about us is that when we do weather, it's not just about like how much snow, but it's also about, because here in Minnesota, what's our favorite season? It's the next season, and we embrace it, and that's why we call it next weather, right? And so it's the so what about the weather? Well, it snows. Well, here's what this means for your home. Here's what this means for sports. Here's what this means for industries. It's not just, hide your kids, hide your wife. It's going to be, 30 inches snowing. It's going to be, okay, here's what this means for travel. Here's what this means for skiing. Here's what this means for, your commute. There's a useful element out of this. And that's what I think is different here versus maybe other markets where weather becomes kind of this, I don't know, there's some performative aspects to it. There's some sort of social aspects to it.
Oh, there's definitely performative aspects, I think, to it. But, and I think that's sort of one way that I've seen particularly TV news evolve is contextualizing. It's not just saying, here's what's happening. There is that element, but also it's embracing the other technologies to give context for here's what it means.
You have to. There's so much content out there.
Right.
There's so much out there. And it used to be, I remember watching, I was growing up in Philadelphia. I always watched the news, like, what's the 7-day forecast going to say?
Right.
Why do you even need to do that when you can just open the weather app? So it's
right.
So you have to give a promise. You have to add something else to lure. I mean, for lack of a better word, it's not customers, but the community. I mean, we have to remind them why we're a public service.
Right.
And you have to give them reason to keep tuning in. And so what can we provide that an app cannot? What can we offer that a tweet or a Facebook post or something will not? And that's effective, objective journalism.
I'm a huge sports fan.
Love sports.
Right. Name the sport. It's this is one of the reasons, the phone technology, the way people consume media. That's why box scores are harder and harder to find in the paper.
Love box scores.
Love box scores.
I love box scores.
Don't need them when I get it to my phone as it's happening, right? You don't see them in the paper as much anymore. You can get more. I mean, they're straight numbers, but if you want to go in depth, there's plenty of ways to go in depth that the paper doesn't offer.
Right. And look, newspapers is a whole separate
totally
industry,
different.
And
you
brought up about print journalism and investigative journalism. I mean, those are tools, and those are those are just things. They're just different. It's not one does better or one does worse. Right. They're just different, and they have different skill sets and different audiences.
Yes. Yeah.
But ultimately, I would say the same priority we share is we have to be good writers.
Yeah.
And so, if we can't do that, then what are we doing?
Right. And then I think you have the additional skill set that's needed is to to be on TV, to say perform. I don't want to distill it down.
There is a performative element to it. I was a theater kid.
Okay.
I mean, that there was something to that. People was like, why do I want to get into this?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I did like performing. I did like being in front of people.
Right.
But of course, it's evolved into not really performing as like it's a show. It's how to make an effective change.
Right. It's to have be a presence on camera, because if you're
and communicate with people.
Right. If you're just telling a story without any, sort of reading the script off in your head, like it's not gonna land.
It's a lot of fun, yes, to anchor a newscast. It's a lot of fun to be live, somewhere where, let's say, it's the opening of fishing season, which I've done in Missouri, and I've had, trout season, and I've had, waiters, and I'm doing a live shot in the water, and
of course,
like that's fun. But the best parts is actually when it's not, so to say, live, but when you're reporting and you're meeting people, and that's not only fun, it's enriching. It makes you a better journalist, but it makes you a better person. My encounters, my experiences, whether it's severe weather, whether it's covering a really dramatic, sobering trial, whether it's covering, education, immigration, like these things, I mean, they really ground you. They really, really show you and teach you what this kind of world is about, what life is about, and they really just give you just such perspective.
I've said for a long time that being a journalist is great. Like, I love it because I get to talk to people. I get to tell stories. Sometimes it is reporting just on the even the mundane, I'm using air quotes for since we're the only ones in the room here. This is an audio medium. The mundane day-to-day of I've covered city council meetings and school board meetings that, are started and done in 15 minutes, but I've got a news hole to fill, and I got to figure out something deep in the notes to tell a story, from a meeting to tell a story of, and it stretches you as a reporter, but it's how you connect with the community, whatever that community is, whether it's the Jewish community, whether it's the suburb that you're covering. Right. It's just, telling the story, telling other people's stories is really important.
Well, and I will tell you, I mean, especially in this day and age with rampant anti-Semitism, and even when there's not, I mean, I want to be the reporter I want to be the representative for our Jewish community here. Mm-hmm. I think historically, of course, with anti-Semitism in this country, I think Jews in media have overcompensated to show that they're not Jewish and to kind of play down their Jewishness.
Yeah.
I am not that person. Mm-hmm. I would say that I'm not that person in the sense that I'm very proudly Jewish. Mm-hmm. I keep kosher. I attend synagogue on Shabbat. I have a little Torah on my desk that I roll to the Parsha every week. I have an Israeli flag. I have some Hebrew. These, like, everybody knows, and I think that kind of intellectual honesty is important. Where I still am careful, of course, is I shouldn't have to be the only reporter to bring up Jewish issues. Right. I shouldn't have to be the only reporter to talk about anti-Semitism. Right. I will when I have to, but I try to, be an Or L'Goyim, right? Be a light unto the nations and help people and teach people about what's going on. But I want to be the resource and connection between our secular media and our Jewish community here.
Right, like when you don't want the news director saying, "Oh, this, there's an incident of anti-Semitism. Jonah, go deal with that."
Well, and I don't want to be the only one to have to pitch it.
Right.
I don't have to be the only one to say, "Hey guys, like, what, this lawmaker said, that's not cool.
Right.
Imagine if this person said something like this about any other group of people.
Right.
Would that be a thing?
Right.
Would we be talking about that? I don't want to have to be the one to say that.
Right.
Now, does that mean I won't say that? No, I mean, it is very delicate. We've actually, and I give my station here wonderful credit. They've been incredibly respectful. They've been incredibly supportive. I've been in other places, though, where it is you're swimming upstream, and you don't want to call attention to yourself. And those are very difficult, positions to be in.
So what was it that brought you to CCO into Minnesota? What was the hook that made you pick up stakes at this point in your career?
It was so I had spent 6 years in North Carolina. Okay. I was the political and investigative reporter there, and that was wonderful. It was a really great place to live. We had wonderful friends. Career-wise, it was wonderful. I think sometimes you become a running back in a passing offense as places evolve.
Yeah.
And so when my contract was up, we kind of said, look, where can we find a good fit? Where can we find Raleigh, North Carolina has a growing Jewish community. Is it a booming Jewish community? Not really. Yeah. We wanted to look for a place with a day school for our kids.
Okay.
And also my wife is from Milwaukee. Her dad is from St. Paul. Her grandma lives. Shout out to Betty Fantel. She lives in St. Paul. So the Midwest was very appealing. And just to show you kind of how small this business is, I was an intern at ESPN in summer of 2006.
Okay.
And then I worked at ESPN right out of college in 2009. And I was working behind the scenes, and I was doing studio production work. And the head of talent was a woman named Lori Orlando.
Okay.
And so she was in charge of picking up people on SportsCenter. And look, I was a sports guy, and ultimately I wanted to be on air.
Sure.
And I went up to her. I met with her, and we became, great friends. And she was a wonderful mentor. And so she was the one who said, Jonah, you want to be on air? You got to get out of here. You got to move to, small town USA and then work your way up. And so I did that. I moved to Wichita Falls, Texas, and then that was my first market. And so anyway, I know a long story. We have a long podcast here.
That's okay.
So long story short, she's now the head of Senior Vice President of Talent at CBS News. And so I reached out to her, and I said, look, am I ready for my major league call-up? I've done this. What else do I need to do?
Right.
I've interviewed presidents. I've flown with the Air Force. I've been on the front lines of, huge, national stories, met international figures. What else do I have to, am I ready? And she's like, yeah. Where do you want to go? And I said, look, my family's from the Northeast. My wife's from the Midwest, maybe, Philadelphia, obviously, New York, Chicago, Miami. And then my wife in the background says, ask about the Twin Cities. And I said, okay, Twin Cities. And she says, yeah, let's. And then all of a sudden, the next day, I get an email from our wonderful news director, Carrie Patey, and it happened all very quickly.
Wow.
Because I was also offered a great position by another station in North Carolina to keep me there. And so, I flew in on Easter Sunday.
Okay.
Had the interview the Monday after Easter, and this is April, and they're trying to sell me Minnesota.
Yeah.
And it's snowing and 30 degrees.
Sure.
In April.
Yep.
And where's my family? We're having actually during it's Pesach, it's Passover.
Yeah.
So we rented a cottage on the North Carolina beach. So I came from the sunshine of the beach in North Carolina. So all right, let me go interview in Minnesota. And you know what? It was great. And boom, here we are. So that was in April, and we moved here in June.
Picture you flying back and saying, here, I know we're on the beach and I know it's warm, but let me sell you on the snow in April and 30 degrees.
I just remember, I'd probably packed my winter stuff up in North Carolina probably at the end of February. So the only jacket I had was a decent jacket, but I brought it here, and we walked from our studios downtown to a restaurant. It's just like, I am not going to show them that I'm shivering. I am not going to show them that I'm shivering.
Just ordering all the coffee when I get to the restaurant.
But you know what? This place is so professional. It is such a high pedigree, and I know from my in-laws. I mean, they grew up watching WCCO.
Sure.
I mean, I heard about all the amazing people that had worked there, and you know, you walk in there and you just see the history, you feel the history, and you also feel the burden of responsibility, knowing
Right.
of how many people count on this place.
Right.
And that was very appealing to me. And I'm also I mean, CBS News is, I mean, it's a premier organization.
No, for sure.
It is historic. It is the mantle. I mean, 60 Minutes. It's great. I love what we're doing we're doing these collaborations now with CBS News. It's growing. It's a great group. So I've really been pleased. It's you know, it's definitely, you know, one of, if not the best places I've ever worked at.
And this is something that I know, having, you know, being in the news industry, but it's a CBS owned and operated station.
Correct.
As opposed to.
Correct. A lot of people don't think that. Like, they think KARE 11, you know, is owned by NBC,
Right.
or you know, KSTP is owned by ABC or anything else.
And they're not.
They're not. They're. It's almost like, I mean, they are almost like franchises.
Right.
You know, and,
Right.
And so I've been in that. I've been in ownership changes.
Oh, ooh.
I've been in, it's been
That's
really
tough.
It
Those
is
are tough
really
spots to be
tough.
in.
That's happened to me twice, where I've been at a station and ownership comes in and changes, and but I've also been in places where it's the same owner and then management changes, and again, you know, new coaches bring in their own coordinators.
Sure, of course.
So I say sometimes you're running back in a passing offense. That happens,
Yeah.
you know, I think that. But this is such a. But CBS has been wonderful, and actually, the head of the CBS group, Wendy McMahon, she used to be here at WCCO.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, that's great.
And then she was at ABC, which is where I just was.
Okay.
So I know Wendy. I know a lot of her great ideas. She's bringing them to CBS, and you can just feel kind of the energy in the group.
Yeah.
Because of just the growth and because of the investment. And I think that's you don't hear a lot about media ventures growing. You hear
Right.
a lot of kind of like trimming.
Yes.
And, you know, trimming the fat.
Particularly
so
on the
rooftop consolidation is what I was told once at another network.
Right. I mean, you hear that a lot on the print side as you see newspapers starting
You
to
hear that
contract.
broadcast too.
Yeah.
But here, I mean, they're hiring new people. We're expanding new shows. We added the 4:00 news now with Jeff Wagner and Aaron Hazanzada, which has been great. And so, you know, to come here, I feel like if this is a stock, you definitely want to buy it.
Yeah.
I can't buy it, but
That's true. That'd be insider trading.
yeah.
But other people
I'm just
could.
saying.
Right.
This is not financial advice. I'm just saying, like, this is a very good place to be, and I'm glad that we're here.
If people are getting their financial podcast out of our discussion here,
TCG folk, it's not helping the stereotype.
No,
sorry.
that's not. But also, like, you don't want to get your financial advice from us.
No.
By any means. So you mentioned ESPN. You worked for the Boston Bruins.
Yeah, in
at
college.
one point when you were in college at BU. What was it about sports that got you sort of so interested in that, and what got you out of it?
So growing up in Philly, I mean, you love sports.
Sure.
Go Birds. When we're taping this, we're Eagles are heading into the NFC Championship game. Not to date this, but obviously,
By the time people hear this, the Eagles...
I'm either going to be in mourning or just elated.
Listen, between the Phillies and the Eagles, you've had a good run. Take it easy. Take it easy.
Sixers are looking good too. Yeah, we'll see.
All right, settle down.
So anyway, so in Philly, you know, you learn to be a great sports fan, and then we moved from Philly. And so sports kind of is what kept me connected. Mm-hmm. So I think that just has always been a part of me. And look, you're a young kid. You're growing up, and you know, a lot of boys, not all of them, but a lot of boys, when they play sports, they also like sports. And I was just a sports guy. And I liked watching SportsCenter, and I liked doing all that stuff. And again, that whole kind of idea. So, breaking news. This may or may not shock people. Both of my parents, mom and dad, are rabbis.
Fascinating.
Okay.
All right.
So I did not want to go into the family business.
Okay, I can understand that.
So since I had an aversion to that, it was like, well, what else could I do? And it was, I also, one of my favorite movies was Good Morning Vietnam. I used to listen to that.
Oh, great.
I used to listen to that soundtrack all the time.
Incredible soundtrack.
And I used to actually like imitate it, like Good Good morning, Vietnam. Hey, this is not a test. This is rock and roll. Time to rock to the Delta, the DMZ. Like, I still remember it.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah,
Okay.
and so I just kind of like got excited about TV and broadcasting and sports. So I got into it. Now, what stopped when I got my first job as a sports anchor in Texas? What's the big sport in Texas?
Football.
What kind of football? High school football.
High school, yeah.
When do they play?
Friday nights.
Friday nights. What's on Friday night?
Yeah, that could be tough if you're observant.
And look, it was a choice I could have made.
Yeah.
And it was a choice that ultimately I said, you know what? I like sports. I like Shabbat better. And I also liked news. I mean, it's not like, yes, I interned at ESPN. I also interned at NBC and at NBC News. And then when I studied abroad, I worked at NBC News in London. So I liked news. I watched news.
Right.
But it was just, that was the natural time to move over.
Okay.
And so that's what I did. And then it kind of took off from there. So I moved over. I became I became just a photographer. I was a photojournalist.
Oh.
And then I became a news reporter and then a weekend news anchor. And then I moved so that was in Texas. Then I moved to Springfield, Missouri, spent 3 years there. Then I did 3 years in Milwaukee, which is where I met my wife.
Okay.
Shout out to Grace. Love you. And then 6 years in Raleigh, North Carolina. And then here I am. We got here in June.
That's sort of the lifestyle in a lot of ways for journalists. If you want to get to a certain place, a certain level, there is a transient nature to that where you've got to sort of make your bones in a small market and work your way up.
And as much as and as confident you can think to yourself, well, I'm ready. I mean, I got it. No, you like that Springfield, Missouri to me, which were 3 of the most incredible years of my life.
Yeah.
You know, that's my grad school, I say.
Mm-hmm.
That was grad school to me. And again, as a Jewish kid growing up in the Northeast, you know, living in Texoma, which is the Texas-Oklahoma state line,
yep.
You know, then Southwest Missouri, you know, and then Milwaukee. And I mean, these places, like my family, bless their hearts. That's an expression I learned out here. And, bless their hearts. Like when I was living in Milwaukee, they're like, "How's Michigan? They could not make up their minds of Michigan, Minneapolis, Minnesota, Milwaukee. They just, I mean, it's out there."
Right.
And then when I was, Yemensvelt, they would just call. But these, remarkable people. And here I come from, very blessed to have a private education, not just in elementary school, middle school, high school, you know, going to Solomon Schechter's Jewish day school, and then, to go to private university, study abroad, and having these amazing things. And then I go out to a place like Wichita Falls, Texas, or Springfield, Missouri, and totally different experiences.
Right.
Totally challenging my comfort zone. It was just, that is so important. That to me was a better, quote unquote, study abroad experience than when I lived in London.
Yes.
That was a more enriching, more educational, more fulfilling study abroad experience than, living in Europe.
Yeah. For sure. I totally get that.
And the family values, so maybe do I know more about history? Do I know more about the financial system? Do I know more about, politics? Yes, but do I have the street smarts of growing up on a farm or understanding how to, build workshops and different things like that? No, it is, they have remarkable skills, wonderful values, something that we can all learn from. And,
right.
And it was just really great. And it helped me as I became a political reporter, and now as I become an investigative reporter, which of course is inherently political because
right.
every issue is political. It's really helped me in terms of how I do my work and how I embrace my job and how I connect with people.
I think every issue being inherently political, that to me is enough to drive me out of something like that. Like, it doesn't have to be all political, but that's, just how people take these things sometimes.
It is, but it's also about validating and acknowledging people.
Yeah.
And recognizing where they are. And my favorite saying is that 2 things can be true at the same time.
Absolutely.
Economy can be doing great and people are still suffering.
Right.
Those things can be true. That happens.
We like to say in the group text at work is that nuance is dead. And
that is so true.
And that is 100%. The problem, is that, yes, both of those things can be true. However, you're counting on people to understand that and to sort of think about it and, read between the lines on issues and understand context.
Right.
And context and nuance are so hard to follow.
Well, but in this climate, when you're scrolling, when you've got your eye, when you're watching a TV show and you're still on your phone at the same time, when you've got eyes everywhere, we're just not wired for that.
Right.
And so but the irony is, people are begging for that substantive content.
Yeah.
They want it. They crave it. They need it.
Yeah.
So who is going to deliver it to them? And that's where I say you've got to differentiate between news gathering and news analysis.
Right.
Talking about news is not news.
Right.
A program where people are sitting around a table, it can be informative, it can be interesting, but that is not news.
Right.
So if you say news media's news is biased, that's not news.
Right.
Watch a half-hour newscast.
Right. There's a difference between punditry and reporting.
Yes. But it's very difficult to see because they're the ones in suits. I saw a great, I don't remember where it was. I saw a great, it wasn't a TikTok because I don't do TikTok, but it was a great reel or something where like this guy was like, there's got to be a dress code for certain things. If you're a pundit, you have to wear like a polo shirt. That way like a journalist is the only one allowed to wear a suit or a tie.
Right.
Because that way well, he's not wearing a suit, so he's not a journalist. It's like you can't wear this unless... Can't wear a tallis unless you're bar mitzvah. Well, you can't, wear a suit.
See, maybe after a year at CCO, you'll get to institute that dress code.
No, Yeah.
So, at what point? I know this was a conversation I had with my wife when I was coming up as a journalist about what I wanted to cover and what I hoped to. Where I hoped a career would take me.
Yeah.
I'd always wanted to be a sports reporter from the time I was 6 years old, and realized that at a certain point I was going to want to have a family, and I was not going to want to. My wife was not going to want me on the road.
Yeah.
6 months a year covering a team.
Yeah.
Even if it meant 6 months off at home, that was not a trade-off.
Yeah.
That worked for her, and I understood, and that was fine. At what point? Again, I know you've been at CCO 7 months. You're not looking for the next gig at all. I'm not saying that you are, so anybody listening, don't go reading into that.
Especially my wonderful managers.
Especially your managers, who I know will listen to this. Although at a half hour in, maybe they've given up on it. We'll see. At what point and I think this goes for anybody in the media, at what point do you say, this is where I want to be? I'm not looking to chase the next thing. I can make a career and a life at the station and in this community. At what point do you stop chasing it?
It's a great question, and it's a moving target. I mean, had you asked me last year what my goal was, it was entirely different than what it was here, because I think it's not just what goal is what you want, but it's also what you think is attainable.
Mm-hmm.
And so, last year when I was in North Carolina, I was heavy in politics.
Okay.
And I was interviewing President Trump, President Biden, Dr. Fauci, Dr. Birx, senators, congressmen, big leaders, and then in North Carolina, which is a heavily military state.
Sure.
The war in Ukraine was about to happen, and I was in touch with the 82nd Airborne, which is right out of Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and they were the ones that were deployed to Poland, and I was working with them to get to Poland.
Wow.
Yeah, and so I was at the time on a track to say, you know what, I really want to be in D.C. I really want to be, part of this news team. I want to be part of that. I want to go in the swamp. And I wasn't getting the message that it's such a swamp. And even though I had interviewed for jobs there, and it is, they don't hire people from outside of D.C.
Right.
They just don't. And that changed. And so, 3-4 years ago or before, I remember I wanted an anchor job.
Right.
And I thought that was the thing. And then I was like, no, you know what? I really like being out in the open. And then this came up and I said, look, investigative work, it's probably better to stay away from politics, because here we can also bring about some real change.
Right.
And we can help people get through their conflicts, and we can help people find fairness and maybe get their money back and maybe bring about some positive change by holding people accountable or getting laws changed or exposing some fraud or different things. That's all. There's just so much. And I think it also becomes not just like what your job is, but yes, the quality of life. I have 2 young children.
Okay.
Rena, who's 5, Romy, who's 2. They are the light of our lives. They are old enough to know and to get sad when I say, I can't come home tonight.
Yeah.
Or I'm working late and I'm sorry. That sucks. That's a very hard thing. But I think they're also going to learn. My parents were working a lot.
Sure.
They will. It's all a balance. It is all a balance, and recognizing that. And I think this is just all for work that you do things to give your family the best opportunities, and it's a balance for you in terms of you love your professional life, you love your family life, and if you can find some equilibrium, that's what it's going to be.
Right. I mean, that's the key, is the balance.
Yeah.
And it's part of how we ended up in the Twin Cities, is one of the reasons.
Yes, and I think this community has a really good balance to it.
Yeah.
Because it's got that big city feel. It's got that hometown community. I was just talking with my manager the other day. It was right before New Year's, and she's, and I said, boy, last year heading into 2022, if you had told me I'd be in, Minnesota 2023, I didn't think about that. She says, yeah, what was it last year? And I said, actually, I was waiting. I was a finalist for a job in New York City. And
wow.
I mean, how much life would have been different? We probably would have been miserable.
Right.
Like professionally, that could have been a pinnacle. But what kind of life is that?
Right.
Miserable.
Mm-hmm.
New Yorkers will tell you they're happy, but they're so miserable they don't want to tell you how miserable they are.
Nice place to visit. I couldn't live there.
I don't even know. I'm sure I like to visit New York. No, it's fun, but
right.
It's got bagel.
Small doses.
Yes. A lot of kosher restaurants.
Yes.
Okay. PSA, Chickies owners, if you're out there, can you open something in St. Louis Park? Why did you have to go to the mall?
Is there space at the mall?
There was. They had it. Chickies was there, and they closed.
Oh, did they close?
Yes. Come up to St. Louis Park. Come on.
I didn't realize they closed there.
Yeah.
I heard it was good.
It was great.
Yeah. There's the
Sato's pretty good, too, though. I have to say.
That's pretty good.
They've got some unbelievable wings. They've got these Asian chicken wings.
Are they good?
Yeah.
I ordered the wrong meat thing when I went there to review it then. I ordered the
chicken pineapple thing?
No, it was just a chicken breast, like thin chicken and fries.
Nothing wrong with that. Yeah.
It wasn't very good. There was wrong.
Chicken wings were great.
Oh, good. I have to remember that.
Yeah.
Sushi was good, too.
I'm sure the sushi is good. I want to know, though, who said to themselves, you know what we need here? Another sushi restaurant.
But it's kosher.
I know. But even so, you want I want kosher things that I can't get.
Right.
I'm just saying. But they're wonderful people there. So
yes, the people are great. The owners are great. Mayor's fantastic. He's a really nice
love
guy.
Mayor, yeah.
He's really nice. Yes.
I go there I do go into the kosher spot, though, and I get some lunch.
Do you?
Yeah. I do like their lunch offerings in there.
I haven't been there for lunch.
Yeah.
I'll have to go check it out sometime.
Yeah. It's great that we have it. I mean, it is.
It's great. It is.
I see. I didn't have any of this in Raleigh, North Carolina. So you talk about the balance, and then, your synagogues, I mean, it's the chicken or the fish. Like, that's
right.
it. You pick one.
Right.
Even if it's not a really good fit, you pick one. We're here. I mean, I love all the synagogues. Like, I want to, and I've talked to Grace about this. Like, we want to belong to many of them.
Yeah.
And we even kind of say we wish there was some sort of community membership where almost like there was a revenue sharing system.
Right.
Because why should it be exclusive? I mean, in this new day and age, you should be part of everything.
Yeah.
That's another podcast for another time.
I know. We should figure out how to make that work, though. That's really interesting.
Yes.
We'll talk about that. All right. Jonah Kaplan, last couple of questions, and
Please.
we'll let you get back to your day of reporting.
Totally avoided, by the way, that question of what I want to do later, what I'm trying to get, what my goals are.
I know. That's
Yeah.
okay, though. It was a good answer nonetheless.
Thank you.
That's fine.
I like what I'm doing here, and I can't wait to see where it leads.
Well, fantastic.
Yeah.
that is the stock answer.
Yes.
That's okay. We'll let you get away with that.
Thanks.
All right. Last couple of questions. First, what is your favorite Jewish holiday?
I think Pesach. I
Okay.
think Passover. But I also really love, I don't know, I love them all. I mean, I guess Purim's okay. I think it's a little bit overrated.
I would think Pesach, at least growing up as the kid of two rabbis, Pesach is nice because it doesn't have the as much the synagogue element as, say, like Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur.
Pesach was big in my house. We
Was it?
always had
Okay.
a lot of people. Like my parents like pride themselves.
But it didn't. There wasn't the pulpit duties that your parents would
No,
have,
that's
like
correct.
other holidays.
That's correct. That's
so
correct.
at least
You know, I think Shavuos is very underrated. I think it gets the shaft a lot of the Shalosh Regalim. You know, it's just, you know, it doesn't have the symbolism, let's say, of, you
and
know,
it's and time of year too. It's like
Right.
you just come out of Passover, you're coming into summer. It's like
right.
it's just enough with the
Right,
things, yeah.
right. Even with the countdown, it's just
Yeah,
not
just
not very
It's just
suspenseful.
not moving it. It's like you know what it's counting to.
Yeah,
Just
I
keep
mean,
going.
I do. I love Rosh Hashanah, and you know, that's an interesting holiday. But I love Rosh Hashanah for many reasons besides just the meaning of the holiday.
Right.
You know, family traditions, and I actually lead a congregation. I've been doing that for 15 years.
Really?
Yeah, in Connecticut. Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, family's been a part of that, and then. Yeah. All right. Good questions. Yeah. Am I missing one? Hanukkah's okay. I know it's like very marketable and all that, but
I enjoy how you named your favorite, but then like 6 others. So it's good work. You got.
I'm trying to make sure I remember them all. You know, Fast of Gedalia. No.
All right, and I know we touched on food a little bit, but what's your favorite Jewish food?
I mean, anything that's kosher meat. I mean,
Kosher meat. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I love good corned beef on rye.
Yeah.
Love brisket. Good kosher chicken wings. We're going on the mega mission. I mean, I'm probably going to be eating shawarma every day.
Well, good. We will hang out at various shawarma spots in Israel.
Yeah.
And
I just
load up.
Yeah, I'm just super excited. So, yeah, I do love that stuff. So, anything that's kosher.
Easy enough.
Yeah.
Jonah Kaplan, thank you so much for coming in. It was a pleasure to finally.
The Who the Folk podcast is part of the Jew Folk
thank you. I
Podcast
appreciate it.
Network,
It
a
was
product of Jew Folk Inc. Please subscribe, rate, and review the show wherever you get your podcasts. If you have suggestions for other podcast guests, please email them to me at editor@tcjewfolk.com. For our other shows, check out tcjewfolk.com/podcast.